Welcome to another edition of Kent Hance, the best storyteller in Texas podcast. Let's start out like we do every week with a saying of the day.
Saying of the day comes from a great basketball coach, Dean Smith, North Carolina, and he said, "A lion never roars after a kill." So, look, guys, don't go out there and brag, after we beat somebody. It'll come home to haunt you. A lion never roars after a kill.
Well, he was a great coach.
He was a great coach, and he had if he got ahead, he'd go in the four corners, and just stall the ball on you, and you couldn't get him. But he, day in and day out, North Carolina still has a great program. But there was a period of time over probably 15, 20 years that he was in the Final Four, the Sweet 16. Every year he'd be in one of the two.
Is he the reason they put the shot clock into college basketball with the four corners? Is that why they?
One of the reasons. Also, if you look at Adolph Rupp, he was the one that put the rule in you couldn't dunk. It was technical if you dunked. Well, they finally got away from that, and of course the crowds love a dunk. But Adolph Rupp, he thought he didn't want. Some of his players couldn't dunk, so he didn't think anybody ought to be dunked. That's just the way he was.
I'm sure you've got some thoughts and comments on the recent events of this week.
One I wanted to mention before I get into anything up. My dear friend and law partner since 1994, Terry Scarborough, passed away. He had been fighting cancer since 2022. And they gave him 4 to 8 months, and he lived 3.5 years. He was a warrior. He was tough. He grew up in Petersburg, Texas, which is small, and in fact they only play 6-man football now. But when he was in high school, they played 11-man and won the state championship. Won it in snow. And they were playing some team from down around Corpus, and they had it in West Texas, and they just had a lot of snow. And those kids from South Texas never seen snow, much less play a football game in it. And they won, and then he got a scholarship and went to Texas Tech. Was a tight end, and in the huddle stood next to Donnie Anderson, who was an All-American and came in as a third or fourth runner-up for the Heisman Trophy. And he would say that his job in life had been to block for Donnie Anderson and to try to make me look like a lawyer. And that was his goal, to accomplish those two things. But he was a great lawyer. Judge Nowlin said he was one of the best, if not the best, he ever had in his courtroom. And Judge Nowlin appointed him to a criminal case one time, and the guy was in federal prison and had enough sentences there to keep him for life, but they still had a case they had to try. And Terry went over and tried it, and they found the guy not guilty. And he hugged Scarborough and thanked him and everything. And he said, "If you ever get in prison, I'll make sure that nobody messes with you." Scarborough thanked him for that, And then when Scarborough's son, Lane, was born, they sent out notices and everything, and he sent the prisoner one who was in Leavenworth, I believe, at the time, and he sent him back a dime. He didn't have much money, but he sent him a dime. I tell Lane, who I call Night Train, "That's good. Your dad, guy gave a dime and promised if your dad ever got in prison that he would take care of him, make sure none of the gangs ganged up on him." And Scarborough's a great guy. His wife, Sissy, took care of him for the last several years. And I tell you, caretakers, that's a tough job. And my sister took care of her husband who had Alzheimer's in about 3 years, and it just broke her health. And so my thoughts and prayers go out to Scarborough and Scarborough family. I know all the family and love them all. And Terry was a great lawyer. When he said, "May it please the court," he said it with confidence and distinction, and the client, all of it, made him feel good. He sounded like he was in control and well prepared, and he was always well prepared.
How did y'all two form a partnership?
We got on a flight one time, one morning in 94, late 93, and going to Dallas. And I had a boarding pass in the top 15, and he had one, I think, around number 280. It wasn't that big, but it's pretty big. I told him I'd save him a seat, and it did. And we got to talking, and we were making changes in our law practice. And I said, we ought to get together and have a partner. And he thought it was a good idea. And then the next day back in Austin, we met, and we started talking about it. And in less than a month, we put together a new partnership. And we had two of our employees, Mel Morales and Lillian Morales, no relation to each other, but they started with us right there close to the first, and they're still there.
Wow.
And it's been 32 years. And I tell you, the hardest thing in running a business is to get good people and train them and keep them. And a lot of people will get them and they don't work out, or they don't train them right or something like that. But I had a guy one time ask me, what's your sick leave? And I said, what do you mean, what's your sick leave? Don't come to the office. You're sick. Don't bring it to the office and get us all sick. He said, no, how many weeks? Do you get 2 weeks? Most people give 2 weeks. And I said, we don't do that. If you're sick for the month, don't come in. Your check will still be the same. And later that young man got sick and missed about 3 months. And his check was still the same. And I think that, when you're working with employees, that you need to consider their ups and downs and let them know that you care about them, and they go out of their way to let you know that they care about you. But training takes a lot of time and can have some high turnover. Mm-hmm. But Hance Scarborough, we have been a good place to work, and everyone gets along, and we have a good situation. And a big part of that was Terry Scarborough. He was a great litigator, one of the best in the state of Texas, but he also cared about his people.
Well, the other thing about your office, there is always some kind of food there.
Yeah, we do that. I've said that in our kitchen, in the snack room, you can put arsenic back there and they'll eat it. That if you get some candy you don't like or something, just take it in there and put it back there, and it'll be gone pretty quick. Mm-hmm. And so they don't turn anything down. I also wanted to talk about last Saturday. I wake up now on Saturday morning and say, wonder what Trump did during the night. Mm-hmm. The bombing in Iran. There's a few events come along in your lifetime that are what I call big events, and big political events, geopolitical events that affect the world. And one of them was in 1979 when the revolutionary group in Iran overthrew the Shah of Iran. His son, the Crown Prince, was taking some classes at Texas Tech, was at Reese Air Force Base doing training, and they left after a while. But he now is being considered as one of the ones that might take over if this regime goes down. But these people have promoted terrorism throughout the world, and they've killed many people of their own people. And if they had a chance to disagree, what happened when the Shah of Iran, he didn't let you be critical of him, and people didn't like that, but they had a lot of other freedoms. And so they kind of got to a religious group, and students and different ones, and they overthrew him, and then when they got was a lot worse. And so you always have to look at that. If we do this, are we going to get a worse situation? And I think the one thing that I've noticed that's really important is what happened in Venezuela and what happened in Iran. Our people are well trained. They're really well trained. And our technology is above others. And so we have a great advantage. But the big issue that's coming up, and this was a big play, the big issues coming up, how do we have a regime change and not have any troops on the ground? That's never happened. And Trump is not one that wants to put any troops on the ground. And that that what he wants to do is to have a regime change. And, he says that, well, now's your time. But they don't have a Second Amendment in Iran, and so most of the people, they're not armed at all. There's nothing they can do, and it is going to be very difficult to have a regime change unless you have some troops on the ground. I'm not necessarily advocating that. I just think the president, he'll come a point in time that he's got to make a decision whether he does that or not. But I certainly back President what he did. We cannot afford to let these people have nuclear warheads. I mean, they have no conception of peace and diplomacy and getting along with others and trying to move forward. And you look at all the terrorist groups they've funded, whether it's Hezbollah or ISIS or whatever, the people that they have funded have just been mad people and impossible to deal with. So every president had kind of get an agreement with the Iranians, and it kicked the can down the road, and then they'd find they were cheating. They were still trying to enrich uranium so they could have a bomb. So they'd go back to negotiating. And I think that Trump came to the realization that they either had to give that up or we were going to do something about it. And he warned them, and it has caused them a lot of difficulties. They're going to be sending a lot of missiles and drones into our neighbors. Now, some of them they've attacked that really weren't involved in this, but now they'll be involved against them. So they live in an isolated society. And one of the things about you take someone that's in charge of a government and they are religious to the point that they believe that God okays everything they do. He's against me and you, and their God is supreme, and it's okay to kill people. It's okay to do whatever they need to do. And that's a worse type of government to deal with. But they live in a closed society, and that's the reason they have so many problems. The Iranian people are great, and they want freedom. You take that in Southern California, there's a TV station and a couple of newspapers and radio station. It's in Farsi, and that they've got so many people in that region, and that most of the people that are alive today, they've never seen freedom in Iran, and so that's just a sad deal. I don't know what will come out of it, but the president did the right thing, trying to make sure they do not get a nuclear warhead. If they do, they'll use it. They'll in the name of God, they'll figure it's best to drop a bomb on me and you. Mm-hmm. And we don't believe that. So, I'm glad the president went after him. And, not many of the Democrats have said anything about Venezuela to talk of much, because how can you take up for someone that he ousted and then he let the other people stay there and they're trying to get things moving? And I don't think Democrats can't go in and say, well, we want the Ayatollah Khomeini back. They'd really be stupid if they did that. But I don't see that happen. But this is a big issue, and we'll see what happens. But it's not. It's going to take some weeks, and there will be loss of life, as we found out yesterday that there were several Americans that have been killed. And you can't. If we waited until they had a nuclear warhead, then you're talking about hundreds of thousands or millions of people getting killed. I mean, we have to act now, and I don't know if the president can pull it off without having any troops on the ground, or if they can make a change and have the UN people there to watch over it. I don't know, but it's going to be worth looking at carefully.
Well, oil prices go up.
Yes, they will, and the president doesn't want that to happen too much, but gasoline prices go up. Really, you're 8 months away from the elections, and he doesn't want to do anything that will hurt that or hurt the chances. I think that, he knows, we all know, that if the Democrats get control of the House, they're going to have impeachment hearings all the time. And so you're not going to be able to get anything done. That's the reason these elections are important. And you got such a slim majority. This election could come out and the Democrats have a few more and be in charge, or the Republicans and have a few more and be in charge in the House. That's really where the action's going to be if there's any type of impeachment brought. And I think the president knows that they're going to do that. I mean, you look at the past, what they've done, and that'll be their number one priority.
That's why he's out campaigning so hard for people.
Yeah, he's out early and campaigning and trying to pick the races they can win. And I need some time to get a friend that's political director at the White House on the show, and I'll try to do that.
That'd be interesting. Love to hear
It's
from
very
you.
interesting, very interesting. The other things came about that I was looking at this week in South Korea. There's a woman that planned a double murder, and she went back. They got to checking on the background, and through Chat GPT, that's where she planned it and got all of her information. And anyone that reads or watches forensic files, they can, if you're going along and making phone calls, they can tell where you were at that time. But she was looking up how you kill somebody with a sedative in alcohol. And so there were two guys, and she killed them both by putting a lot of sedatives in the alcohol, and they, their heart got slow, it just finally stopped. And she was found guilty, and it was just crazy. And they said a psychological assessment of her was going on at this time. Well, I mean, you just told me enough when I read the first part of it. She's crazy. And another issue that came up that was outside the United States on stupid criminals was a guy in New Zealand woke up, and there was a naked woman on top of him, had a knife in one hand and a skillet in the other, and was beating him with the skillet and stabbing him. And that when she went in front of the judge, she asked the judge not to find her guilty because she's afraid she wanted to be a school teacher and it might hurt her chances. And she should have thought about that before she got drunk and attacked him. We also had, and this is for animal rights people, but some guy in Los Angeles gave a hawk some alcohol, got the hawk drunk, turned him loose, and they don't know what all happened, but he had somebody video it. And anyway, he got 45 days in jail, and that was pretty stupid. But he posed with holding the hawk and letting the hawk have a few drinks. I knew a guy in college that he'd get drinking beer, and he had a bowl. He put water in for the dog, and he'd pour beer in there, and that dog would drink the beer. And water is what the dog needs, not beer. You should remember that. They had in Maine, there was a police chase, high speed. They clocked the cars at over 105. And that the guy that was driving, he had a lot of drugs in the car. And and I'm talking about a lot. And he was booked on $60,000 bail, and he wanted to get out so he could earn enough money to pay his lawyer. And the judge didn't go for that. He's still in jail. There's also a sports writer came up with what high schools have produced the most NFL players. And the Fort Union Military Academy in Virginia has produced a lot of football and basketball professional players. And they had on their list 68. Eddie George, who played for the Titans and played at Ohio State, running back. And Vinny Testaverde, quarterback down at Miami. And they both went there. And then Long Beach Polytech High School in California had 61 in the NFL. Juju Smith-Schuster was one of them, and Deshaun Jackson. And then there was another high school in Florida that had 51, and they had Joy and Nick Bosa, and then Michael Irving. Now, Michael Irving could not win an election in College Station. When Miami played A&M this year, he had an Aggie jersey of number 12, 12th man, a lot of tradition, and was whipping it with a belt. And I didn't know if he's drunk or stupid or what, but the Aggies were upset about that, and rightfully so. I don't blame them. I've got another question that people I hear talked about from time to time. What's the one high school that's produced 2 Heisman Trophy winners? It's in Texas. It's a Woodrow Wilson Wildcats, and they had they had Doak Walker and Tim Brown, and they had my friend Ward Williford, who was no friend of mine from college, but he never did win the Heisman, And they Woodrow Wilson High School right there in Dallas.
That's in Dallas. Okay.
Yeah, turned out 2 Heisman Trophy winners, and I mean that's pretty good. Also, a survey came out of the most sinful states, and I think most people would have guessed the first one was Nevada, and dead last, 50th was Wyoming, and I think that that's easy to understand. Not a lot to do in Wyoming, and you can't get in a lot of trouble in Wyoming. But of the top 10, Nevada was 1, California 2, Louisiana 3. I can understand that, Louisiana, and Florida 4, Texas 5. That kind of surprised me. Tennessee 6, Mississippi 7th most sinful state, Illinois 8, Arizona 9, and New York 10. One other thing, USA Today, I was reading this last week, and they said 39% of the people had cried on the job. And that's pretty unusual. I was a lot higher than I would have guessed. And that they said another 39% thought about crying on the job. That doesn't mean there's a lot of us left that not only hadn't cried on the job, but don't think about it. And but the full story was that they usually cried about something that didn't have anything to do with their job. They're having problems elsewhere. The saying of the day, a lion never roars after a kill. Dean Smith, basketball coach in North Carolina.